Book Woman is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's agency founder, leading professional service brand transformations, and of course, the author of the book, The Naming Book, no other than Mr. Brad Flowers.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm fabulous, fabulous, Mr. Brad, and thank you so much for being part of Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, sure. So I founded Bullhorn in 2008 at the kind of height of a recession with no experience and no clients. So I've had a lot of experience learning how to run a professional services firm, which thankfully I'm now able to use in the brand work that we do. As you mentioned, leading professional and financial service firms through brand transformations. And our focus specifically is on naming, brand identity, and brand launch. And to that end, as you mentioned, I wrote a book called The Naming Book, which is 5 steps to generate better brand names. And I really was thinking about the entrepreneur who wants to get in, find a good name, and then move to the thousand other things that they need to do. And so the book is sort of part business book, part worksheet. So it's actually a practical guide to generating better names, and starts with good criteria. Goes through the practices to generate more names, and then all of the exercises that we use then at the end of the process to help make the best decision possible.
The best decision, and thank you so much for sharing to the world, Mr. Brad. Thank you for
Yeah,
producing such a good book for us. And you need an applause for that.
I love it.
Thank
This I feel
you.
so good.
Thank you. We celebrate you on Book 101 Review. So tell us for this book, how did you crafted it?
Yes, the book I wrote it. We were growing our naming practice, and so we were getting to the point to where we really started to need um, external help generating names just as we got busier and busier. And so I had a lot of friends who were writers, poets, um, professionals who had an interesting take on language, but I didn't have a good way of helping them go from that knowledge to actually using that knowledge to create names. And so I created the outline really as an internal training manual for just taking people, here is what I do. Here's how I go from meeting with the client, getting the idea, creating the criteria, and then here are the exercises I go through. And so I had this book outline, and I approached I actually, in retrospect, I didn't know it at the time, but I got super lucky. I reached
Mhm.
out to a woman named Vanessa who was working for Entrepreneur Press, because I thought the audience, their built-in audience, would be a really good fit for this particular book. I reached out to her about the idea. She really liked it, and she kind of reviewed what I had, and then I went through the a couple of editorial cycles with their team. One was a content editor, and so they looked through and said, this makes sense, but you have all these logic gaps. You need to write more. And so really overall, the it ended up getting probably twice as long as I worked on it with their team. And then they did the fact checking and um, made sure the grammar was right, all the things that helped me look smarter than I actually am. And so I appreciate the team there very much. And there's an organization now called Broad Books, and they do some great work, and put out a lot of nonfiction titles that are really compelling. And if you have an idea, I'd reach out to them. They're on LinkedIn.
Mr. Brad, let's do the naming gap. You frame naming as a critical business skill. What is
Hmm.
the most common costly mistake companies or entrepreneurs make when they approach naming without a real process?
Well, there's probably a lot. I would say the biggest mistake people make is over indexing on what they like and focusing on names that they like. The problem is we can't really trust the names that we like, because when we think about brand names or brands that we like in general, we tend to like them for lots of other reasons, and then the name just sort of isn't well, a lot of times it's there's this idea called the halo effect, and I
Mm,
didn't create the idea. That's a separate book that if you're interested, called the halo effect. It's really interesting. It talks about why it's hard to analyze business decisions, because we have this bias towards success, and we tend to think that if someone was successful, they made a good decision, where a lot of times there's a lot of other factors. So we get this halo effect around names. And so you think about Apple, for example, and people really have a lot of resonance, love the name Apple, or even like the iPhone, they might have resonance with that. But compared to something like BlackBerry, BlackBerry is probably a stronger name for lots of reasons. But because
mhm.
the company wasn't as successful, we don't tend to have the same perception. And so I think the main thing that people do is they start looking for things that they like, and they don't start off with criteria. And it's really important to generate the criteria that would make the name successful. And there are a couple of really key things. Probably the biggest thing is, now, as there are I don't know the stats, but you know, thousands and thousands of companies, new companies every year. Is the name available to be registered as a trademark? Because practically the name should be the cornerstone piece of intellectual property for your business. And if you pick something that's not available to be trademarked, it doesn't really matter how much you like it. It doesn't really matter how good of a name it is. If it's not something that's ownable and foundational for your brand, it's not a success. And so I would say that's the number one mistake. People don't think about the criteria, and especially within the criteria, they don't consider how difficult it will be to qualify for a trademark, especially if you're in a market like United States, Canada, uh, Europe, something like that. A lot of competitive markets. I don't
Mhm.
mean just those, but yeah.
Indeed. So the subtitle promises names that sell. How does strategically created name actively contribute to sales and marketing in a way a merely clever or personal name does not?
Yeah. So I think the best thing a brand name can do is buy you a couple seconds of attention. Anymore, everything is so crowded. You can picture the frozen section of a a grocery store in any city pretty much across. I'm in the United States right now, so across the United States, across Canada, you can think of how many options do you have. It's crowded, and that's not even considering choices if you're shopping online, doing research in advance. And so, really, I think if you have a good name, it can buy a couple of seconds, and within that couple of seconds, what can happen is the rest of the brand can kind of fill in the gap and create the opportunity for intrigue. And so that's really what you want to create, is intrigue. And so it would be overstating to say the name is the most important thing in all of this, because it's the name is just a small piece of the puzzle. Your brand has a lot of levers. The name, the logo, brand identity, colors, typography, photography, package design, website design, all of these things are hugely important, and the name's just one piece. But if the name can kind of create some interest with your customer, and the rest of those give you an opportunity to tell your brand story, you have a good chance to be successful.
Can you give us a high level overview of your five-step framework? What makes this sequence particularly powerful for cutting through the overwhelm of naming, Mr. Brad?
Yeah, I think I can even summarize it. In the book, I break it down into 5 steps, but, I think I can even condense it to 3 steps for the readers. The first step is understanding what goes into creating criteria. And so what it helps people do is establish there are kind of hard and soft criteria from my perspective. So hard criteria would be, is it available for a trademark? Is there a URL available that you can afford? Are there social handles that are available? There are some of those things that are sort of yes or no. And then there's going to be another host of criteria um, for established brands. Is this in line with your, in some cases, maybe your brand architecture? Does it match with other names that exist in your kind of brand ecosphere? Or does it fit with the culture of your organization? So if you're a service company, for example, in my opinion, the culture is really important because when you're providing a service, it's really the collective intelligence of the people within the culture that you're selling. And so that getting the tones right for a name to match that group of people is really important. So that first step, creating the criteria, hard criteria, soft criteria, hard criteria like URL availability, trademark availability, soft criteria like brand alignment, brand architecture alignment. Does it match the brand tones? And then there are a few other things in the book. There are some linguistic tricks to make words more memorable. And a lot of times you can kind of think of a lot of candies and use this sort of thing. So you can think of names like Kit Kat and Reese's Pieces, things where they use uh, rhyme for one thing. Coca-Cola is another one where there's like kind of repeated sounds, initial hard consonant, etc. So if you're interested in criteria, you can go deep into it. And there's no really right criteria, but the important thing is that you do it and that it's right for you. The middle step, which I break up into three in the book, are different ways of generating names. So the middle step is all about name generation. And people get this one wrong too, I think, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
And what people do is they start looking for the right name. And what the problem with that is, like an overused metaphor, it's sort of like the needle in the haystack. It's just like the chances of finding something are so low. And so there was a book about creativity by the founders of the design firm IDEO, and they give an example of a pottery class. And the pottery class, one student is graded on the quality of the best piece that they make all semester. The other student is graded on how much all of the pottery that they make weighs. So it's really, they're trying to generate the most pottery. And so interestingly enough, the person who makes the most pottery over the course of this class also always makes the best pottery. So if you're focusing on one thing and trying to make it perfect, that's when in any creative endeavor, whether it's uh, a logo or a name or whatever, you're going to have a hard time. So the whole point of this section of the book is to give you tools to create lots and lots of names. If we're naming for a company, we will usually end up this process with about 300 to 500 uh, candidates. And so
Mm-hmm.
really, if the average person tells you they're naming a company and you ask how many they've created, they'll maybe say five, you know, maybe 10 at the most. But we're talking really moving quite a bit beyond that. To come up with a good name that's going to meet all your criteria is going to have to be. It's just the product of work and of generating a lot of ideas. And then at the end, it really circles back, brings the criteria back in, and kind of helps you create a matrix to make a decision that isn't just, you know, I showed my partner and they liked this one, or I like to say this one the most or whatever. It's about what meets your criteria and what name is going to be put you in the best position for success, because that's really what we hope to do.
Yes, that we hope to do for sure, and we hope that will be successful. And Mr. Brad, Step two, ideal generation. How do you guide people to move beyond the obvious generic ideas into a territory that is both unique and ownable? What is
Hmm.
the technique to break the initial creative logjam?
That's that's a great question. I would say we do it in two ways. One is there are different types of names. And so the first thing is we're going to start off. So you can imagine if you have a spreadsheet across the top, we're going to have different types of names. And so
Mm,
that might be an English word like apple. So English word might be one. A next one might be compound, and that would be two words put together like Facebook. Another category might be blend, which is two words where there's a syllable that overlaps, like Pinterest,
mhm,
where Pinterest isn't actually a word, but it's two words kind of smushed together. There are phrase names there, which would be like a short phrase. I think I can think of. I don't know if they're still around. There was a brand that was interesting for a while called Outdoor Voices, and so that's just kind of a short phrase that summarizes what it's like, what the brand is like, and that really kind of captures your attention. And they sold athletic apparel, but the idea of Outdoor Voices sort of gave you a sort of sense. It like sounded loud and confident and proud. So we're going to put all the types of names across the top, and then we're going to try to create lots of variety. And so one example of an exercise that I do is um, when I'm trying to generate a broad range of names, I'll use metaphorical thinking, which is sort of um, using something that doesn't exactly mean that, but is similar. And so what I mean is, if you talk about Bullhorn, for example, Bullhorn is a branding agency, and we create names and we create logos and we deliver websites, that kind of thing. So that's what we
mhm,
do. But when people talk to us, sometimes they might say, "Oh, it felt like going to brand therapy." So for Bullhorn, a therapist would be a metaphor for what we do. We don't actually provide therapy in any actual sense, but that's a metaphor. And so I might put therapist at the top. And then I'm going to go down from there, and I'm going to think of just brainstorm off the top of my head what are words that come to my mind when I think of that metaphor. And I might think of paper, pencil, couch, conversation, talking, Freud, Jung, archetypes, and so a word like archetype is quite a long way away from your brand identity or something. And so that's one way, is using these like metaphorical jumping off points to go really deep. And that's one example in the book, but there are several other examples of how you can kind of create these jumping off points that helps create diversity of thinking and diversity of ideation.
Interesting, interesting, Mr. Brown. So, as an author, as a founder, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, as a founder, as well as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Short term, long term. Got it. Okay. Um, so I have short term and long term goals related to the business. Um, we are we have just kind of gone through. Well, one thing one thing that's sort of embarrassing. It's branding agencies, I think, are probably pretty notorious for the cobbler's children situation, where it's the idea that the cobbler's children have no shoes. Um, and so we can often be so invested in our clients that we have a hard time taking a step back and thinking about our own brand. And so over the last year, we've really spent a lot of time thinking about who who do we provide the best results for? Who can we get to know the most quickly? Who can we um, understand? Who do we provide unique insights for? What kind of clients is our process sort of uniquely positioned to help? And so we've thought a lot about that front end brand positioning sort of stuff, and we've really honed in on um, on professional and financial services, because what we found, our process tends to be culture oriented and really digging deep and diving into their culture. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I think that's important because service providers, the culture is really their main differentiator. Their people is their differentiator. They're not, it's not product attributes or some other sort of technology generally. And so the quicker we can, and the quicker and the more confidently and comprehensively understand their culture, the better we can do when we move into that second phase of design, when we're creating brand identity assets, when we're creating the language that really works for them. If we get that beginning piece right, we can do a better job. So I think short term, I would say my number one goal is proving out that positioning and uh, creating marketing for ourselves and showing that we can generate leads within our niche. That's another thing. Agencies are notoriously have a notorious hard time generating leads. They tend to be good at, if you're good at what you do, you tend to create a lot of word of mouth referrals, which is amazing, and I love it. But a big goal of ours is to create the marketing engine that kind of creates leads for us, so that it's a better, more sustainable business. And I would say that's the main thing I'm focused on right now.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Brad, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Mm. Well, I would say if you have aspirations to write a book and it's sort of a side hustle, I would find where are kind of the margins in your life where you're maybe sitting there scrolling on your phone, or doing something where it's maybe just not as useful as it could be. And we all have those times. Writing a book, it sounds like a big task to come up with 80,000 words or 50,000 words or however long the book ends up being. But really, you just write them one word at a time. It's like basic, stupid advice, but anyone can sit down and write, 500 words a day. And if you can write 500 words a day, which is just about a page, that book will be done in no time. So, for example, in the last year, I decided that I wanted to write a novel, and one of my sons is a soccer player, and which means I go to a lot of soccer practice. And I wrote almost a whole novel just sitting in the car. I'd sit down, open my computer, start my hotspot, start writing. And so we all have those little bits of time where it's just like underutilized. So, take 30, 45 minutes a day and put the work in, and it'll happen before you believe it, really.
Hmm. Yes, and thank you for that advice, Mr. Brad. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence you, Johnny?
That's a good that's a good question. I'm sort of obsessive about tracking books that I've read. One I just recommended to a friend. So I had a post recently on LinkedIn suggesting that business leaders need to read more fiction or novels, short stories, that kind of thing. And my rationale is that there's a ton of literature out there about being an empathetic leader and leading with empathy. And I think that's great. It makes a lot of sense. The problem is reading books about empathy don't make you more empathetic, but reading novels actually makes you more empathetic, because the act of reading fiction, you have to put yourself in that character's position in order to even understand the book. So you put yourself in the character's position, you understand their world, their worldview, why they make decisions, good decisions, even terrible decisions. You have to kind of understand at least why they did it. And so the act of reading fiction, I think, just makes you a better leader. So if I was to give one piece of advice, that would be my suggestion. And a book that I think is an easy starting place for a lot of folks is the book I recommended for this friend who reached out and was like, "Yeah, I hear you, but I'm more into, business books." And so I suggested starting with, and don't get me wrong, I love business books. I've read hundreds of them.
Hmm.
But I suggested The Old Man and the Sea, which is a novel by Ernest Hemingway, and I think it's set in Cuba. It's set in the Caribbean anyway. And it's this old guy who is a fisherman, and he's had a run of bad luck. And to break his bad luck, he's going to row out past further than anyone has kind of rowed. And so he's out. And I think it's like a really interesting metaphor for business people, because we sort of think like if things aren't working out exactly right, we can kind of outwork everybody else, and that we can turn it around. And so he actually does that. He goes way out there, and he's like extremely knowledgeable. He knows exactly where to go. He knows exactly how deep to put his hook, and he catches this huge fish, brings it up to the side. However, because he's rowed out so far, it takes like half of a day just to get back to the shore. So he's rowing, and as he's rowing, these sharks and other fish are coming and taking chunks out of the fish. Anyway, I'm kind of giving away the plot, but you get a sense of like it's a good metaphor for what's important in our life and how do we approach challenges and what's meaningful and what can we hold on to, how much can we control, how much can't we control. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yes, I thank you for that recommended book, Mr. Brad. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and my book 101 review in sixth season as well, comedy 101 third season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 are in fifth season, science 101, sex 101 fourth season, and my BB podcast, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your
Amazing.
podcasts. Yes, so thank you, Mr. Brad. Ultimately, what does a truly great name do? Is it descriptor, a feeling, a starter, or the first and most important marketing asset a company ever creates?
I think it's all of those things, but according what I said before is I think it's that story starter. I think it's a story starter, and then once it takes on a life of its own, I think it changes a little bit, and it becomes a source of confidence for you. And that's the thing that's really irreplaceable, is when you can kind of know if you're a little embarrassed to tell someone the name of your company, where you work, what you're working on,
Hmm.
or if it gives you confidence and you're proud. So I think that's the real eventual differentiator.
Definitely. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Brad.
Love it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, you can check out the book at thenamingbook.com, or you can find us at Bullhorn Creative pretty much anywhere on the internet, including bullhorncreative.com, where you can see the work that we've done and our process that is uniquely situated to helping lead professional service companies through brand transformations.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Brad, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this will rise. So, Mr. Brad, I have one more question. If someone listening only has time to implement one practical takeaway from the book this week, what should it be?
I would say the one practical takeaway is to create the criteria that would make a good name. And I think a lot of people have this concern in the back of their mind, and they're uncertain whether they need a new name or not. And I think if you go through that process of thinking about the criteria, it can help you either put those worries to bed and forget about it and sleep better, or decide, okay, we need to change this thing and we're going to hire someone to get it done now.
Yes, Mr. Brad. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Monica people, see you soon.